Okay, well, it is another episode of the Alex video, and I have a lot of things I'd like to say today. One thing I'm going to try to do is stare into the camera. As I learn how to do this, I learned that maybe there's a camera for me to stare into, and it'll make it for a better video. And we'll see if that happens. The other thing I wanted to talk about is my week, and just some general observations, and a little bit about my story. The reason the story bits, the reason that the story is important today, because I actually really haven't talked too much about specifics, is it really allows me to reframe a lot of the things that I go through in comparison to probably how other people deal with it, except for the elderly. So, why don't I start with this? So I'm 33 years old, and when I was 18 years old, I started on psychiatric medication, heavy psychiatric medication, within a year or so, by a prescribing psychoanalyst, psychiatrist who was not really in his right mind because he was a drug addict who was abusing medication during office hours, and he got in some trouble for that. The thing about me in those years, 18 and 19, 20, 21, is they were pretty lonely because I was really blitzed out of my mind. My parents didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what was going on, and I had been able to earn some money when I was 18, save up some money, a few $1,000s to get an apartment, which I got. But then after a little while the money ran out and I couldn't afford to live there, so my parents gave me money to live, but being that it was a cheap apartment, they didn't give me very much, so I was just sort of in a cave for a while there. I ended up, and I know now this is a semi-common side effect, but I ended up drinking a lot of alcohol. I never had any appreciation or problem with alcohol in my teens or early 20s, but when I was 21, 22, I started drinking, and then craving it and drinking it more, and by the time I was 24 I went off to a rehab center. The reason for the rehab center actually is a failed attempt to get off my psychiatric medication. At that time I was just taking a benzo and an antidepressant, and I tried to get off with both of them following my doctor's orders, and each wanted me to get off very rapidly. So what ended up happening was a humongous crash. I turned out to be one of those people who was highly sensitive, and I was not able to go from 6 milligrams or 5 or 6 milligrams of Klonopin a day to 0 milligrams of Klonopin a day within a 6-week time frame. What happened is I got down to about half the dose, which is 3 milligrams, and then 2 milligrams, with just a tremendous amount of psychic and physical torture. And then I started drinking a record amount of beer because it was about the only thing I could do in that condition. I made it to the store, which was within walking distance of my apartment, and come back and drink and lie in bed and go to the toilet, and sometimes crawl to the toilet because it's trouble to balance myself on my legs. I mean, if you've been through benzo withdrawal that's real intense, or if you happen to be someone who's predisposed to real intense benzo withdrawal. It was also I had discontinued entirely my antidepressant, which I'd taken for by that time 6 years. So though I'd taken different antidepressants, always an SSRI of the newer variety. In any event, I ended up in drug rehab for alcoholism, and I got out and again had, but when I got there I was so messed up from the withdrawal, they thought that I had a more serious diagnosis. Also my psychiatrist thought I had probably a more serious diagnosis because he gave me one in the era when he was really a little too high to be making those kind of judgments, unfortunately. And when I got there, my withdrawal was so bad, they sent me to an evaluation, and they thought I was maybe schizophrenic I came in with the diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, or they thought maybe I had Asperger's or autism. So those are some pretty severe disorders. Schizophrenia is probably, the harshest diagnosis in the psychiatric universe. So anyway, I went off to see a psychologist for a formal evaluation. What happened in the interim, though, is that this rehab, they bumped my benzo back up and they put me back on an antidepressant. So when I went to see the psychologist, this lady, I didn't come back with any of these diagnoses. She gave me just depression, anxiety, and a personality disorder called avoidant personality disorder, and also chemical dependency, because I did drink a lot and I was pretty avoidant and anxious, and I was depressed actually, sort of as a result of everything that I've been through. I did get depressed, I think, though I don't see myself as someone who's ever really been prone to depression. So where does that take us? Well, I leave and I'm on this humongous amount of medication. I can't stop drinking, and 8 months later, I go back to this rehab, and I was there for a long time for the original visit. The second visit, I was only there for a few weeks, 20-something days, and I just took off. And I was like, okay. And then I stayed sober for almost a year and a half. But it was very, very challenging. I was on antipsychotic, 2 antidepressants, 3 antidepressants at the same time, Wellbutrin, which is sort of an oddball antidepressant, and 2 SSRIs, Zoloft and Lexapro, on good doses, and various antipsychotics, mostly Abilify, but also Geodon, Seroquel, and I had a lot of problems in that 18 months, which should have been good, because I had been, I learned that I was an alcoholic, deeply diseased person and all this, but that 18 months was just really hard because of the side effects of the medication. But I thought, this is my life and this is what it is and all that. I mean, I had been told, at this rehab by these professional people that I'd never be able to support myself or work a job, or I was not a normal person. I was a person with a severe mental illness, and it wasn't until years later that I got back the evaluations from our medical records, and not even, they told me this while all the paperwork they had didn't indicate those diagnoses, or that would be the likely outcome. And lots of people are pretty functional with anxiety and depression. And as it turns out, I don't really think I think a lot of my problem started when I started on psychiatric medication, which is why I make these videos. But we're getting somewhere. So after this 18-month period of sobriety, what happened is that I relapsed. And this time I didn't just go back to drinking, which for me was fairly harmless. I went into drugs. I've never really explored why I did that. Maybe because I'd, been a drunk a couple times and I ended up in the same boat. At this point I was in my 20s and pretty dependent on my folks. So maybe I thought, well, I'll get their attention if I get into harder drugs. But honestly, I haven't given it a lot of thought. I'm spitballing that in the moment. But so, all of a sudden, and I got into just all sorts of bad behavior, impulsivity and spending, and just really stuff that you're embarrassed about. And, what can you say? But within, there's a line in the Hemingway book about a character, Mike Campbell, talks about how he went bankrupt, and he says, gradually and then suddenly, whereas I seemed to go bankrupt the opposite. I went bankrupt pretty suddenly. I didn't have that much money. Actually, I did have a decent amount of money for someone who never had a job, because I managed some investments pretty well and got lucky. Where I live, there were a lot of tech companies and stuff, and I had a small amount of money that went up 50 times its value in the 90s. The 90s. Remember those days? When money grew on trees? Well, yeah. A lot of people have made money in the 90s, and if you didn't, you're kind of screwed now. It's a lot harder. No one's buying your nickel for $1 anymore, are they, Mark Cuban? So, anyway, the main point of all this is that I completely lost everything. I lost everything. My dignity, my self-respect, my health, my money, my place to live, and then went through psychic pain when I went to another rehab because of the drug use, and they took me off the benzodiazepines that now I've been on for close to a decade or 80 years or something. So it was a horrific period, and within a couple months, I didn't realize I was actually in a horrific benzo withdrawal, but I felt so bad, I decided to kill myself, and I attempted suicide on September 3rd, 2008, and went to a mental hospital and all this. It was a nice mental hospital, though. Not the kind that, like, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest mental hospital. So, anyway, why do I tell you all that? Because everything that happens to me now has to be seen in light of that. Everybody who knew me after crack cocaine and after I lost all my money and all my dignity and couldn't keep a cell phone on for more than a couple months and couldn't stay in a sober house and couldn't keep a job that didn't pay more than $6 an hour plus tips. There weren't really any tips, but I try to be fair to the facts. Everybody kind of wrote me off, you know, and I wrote myself off because I tried to kill myself. And so anyway, where does that take me now? So I feel like everything that happened post September 3rd, 2003, it's been some horrific years. Things just got worse and worse until I finally decided I need to get off this medication, because I have nothing else to lose. Maybe this isn't helping. And I went through a rough period with that, which I'm still kind of dealing with. But and I still take some benzos, which I'll have to talk about in the future. And I'm working on getting off those. They're a nasty beast. The point of it all is that time has new meaning for me. For most people, time is just day after day after day. Most of the people who I've known for a long time in my life, their life is a string that's more or less linear, and where they are now, it's not too hard to have envisioned them there, say, 10 years ago, whereas no one who knew me 10 years ago, no one would have imagined, or 12 years ago, or let's say as a high school graduate, would have imagined that, you know, in my early 30s, I'd be a bankrupt person with these addiction history and all the rest of it, living in his mom's house. Also, some of the scenery's changed here at Alex's studio because my mom bought some furniture. And seeing as no one watches, no one will notice the difference. But when you go through all of this stuff, you know, you start to realize, well, you know, like I could have died very easily, could have died. Well, even though things are hard or whatever, you have to make a choice, and I made the decision that I don't really think anything I go through in the future can ever be worse than what I went through in the past. I mean, no matter how bad things get, they can only get as bad, because I'll never allow myself to be drugged in that way again. And the insanity that I went through is undescribable, and it's the only thing that's hard about it, besides the memories of it, is the way people look at you who know certain things of your past, and it is what it is. And until you do something tangible, basically money-wise, to reestablish yourself, so you get out of your parents' house and are healthy and functioning and functional and working and contributing and self-sufficient, then people continue to sort of have their one eye sort of looking at you with a bit of doubt, because who's to say? I mean, this is a sort of an outlandish story for people who don't know how these things can happen. So when I look at the fact that I'm 33 and I could easily live another 40 or 50 years, it's almost like found money, like a second chance or whatever. And maybe that's the one thing that I can have some sort of gratitude for about this whole deal, is that even though I'm not able to do everything I want to do right now, just the chance that I can do it is so encouraging. When I was told, over and over again by people who gladly took money from my insurance company and my parents, who certainly didn't invalidate anything they said by any of their actions, is that I have the opportunity to go out and live a life. It's like I consider it like overtime life. Like, I died on September 3rd, 2008, and that was 3.5 years ago almost. So even the one thing that's hard, but of course it's going to be hard, is the lost time. But on the flip side, you get the advantage of maybe an appreciation of time that most people just don't have, because the person, I don't basically want to ever really run into people who knew me between 24 and 32 or so, or even 20 and 32, because they didn't know me. They only think they do. And for all those people who get to go on first dates when they're 18 and 19 and, or get married, or, of course, occupationally start a career, things like this, get established, do those things on schedule, you can't go back and make that up. So, in any event, I just wanted to talk about that, because time is ticking. Alex has got to get healthy. But even if I never recover or never achieve anything or get run over by a bus, I've got this free time that I got to participate in here on the planet, because I could have died on September 3rd of 2008. So, it's sort of fun to be the guy with nothing to lose. So maybe, if you're out there, and I don't know how common people like me are, I like to hope not that common, then especially if you're earlier in the journey, I hope maybe you take a chance to look at it like, not that you lost, even though you did, but you choose to focus more on the fact that you've escaped the madness that you were in, the person that you were told you were, and the garbage that you endured. it wasn't really real. It wasn't really you. It was a big mistake. I mean, it wasn't involuntary. I mean, other people chose to put you through it and didn't intercede because they were making a lot of money and they felt like, hey, you know, kids got whatever. Who's got schizoaffective disorder, he's got schizophrenia. Well, what do they expect us to do? Keep paying me. So when you're dealing with people like that, you get away from it, you get some perspective and things, you know, they look up, obviously. So, I don't know, that's just, I'm going to make another video right after this, but that's just what I want to say about time, you know. Appreciate the fact that you've escaped, because I appreciate my escape. In fact, the escape is the highlight so far. In many ways, I'm like someone who just turned 18, brand new person, but I'm not 18, but everything from here on out, it's all gravy. Can't lose. Alright, thanks guys.